have their seats, we're going to go ahead and get started with the Committee of the Whole. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. And welcome also to all of our members joining us from YouTube. I convene the meeting of the Committee of the Whole. This is a semi-official meeting required by the standing rules. No actions or votes will be taken. Rather, it's an opportunity to consider and discuss issues and recommendations that will come before the board during the official meeting. My executive assistant will now call the official roll.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Morning. All right. National Commodore Gus Formato.
Present.
Vice National Commodore Mary Kirkwood.
Present.
Immediate past National Commodore Alex Milewski.
Present.
Chief Director Auxiliary Captain Troy Glendye. Deputy National Commodore Atlantic Area East and Mission Support Alan Fred. Deputy National Commodore Atlantic Area West and Operations Patrick Ferry. Deputy National Commodore Pacific Area and Recreational Boating Safety Tiny Singler. Deputy National Commodore Information Technology and Planning Linda Merriman. District Commodore First Northern John Hume. District Chief of Staff, First Southern, Michael Classic. Thank you. District Commodore 5th Northern, Kurt Sarek. District Commodore 5th Southern, John Krogman. District Commodore 7th District, John Holmes. District Commodore 8th Coastal Region, Peter Scamato. District Commodore 8th Eastern, Chris Whitaker. District Commodore 8 Western Rivers, Brock Stevens. District Commodore 9 Central, Patricia Mitrowski. Got it. District Commodore 9 Eastern, Richard Evans. District Commodore 9 Western, Sonny Thatch. District 11 Northern, Curtis Hahn. District Commodore 11 Southern, Michael Borzath. District Commodore 13th District, Danny Kinley. District Commodore 14th District, Michael Currig. District Commodore 17th District, Marion Parrish. And President, National Association of Commodores, Robert Lauer. All here.
Thank you. During this session, there'll be comments from the Chief Director of Auxiliary, the Vice National Commodore, and there will be reports from the 4 Deputy National Commodores, as well as the President of the National Association of Commodores. We will now hear these reports from the National Executive Committee.
Captain Glendye, you're up first, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. So great to be here in beautiful Orlando, Florida, and it's my honor here to kick off the Committee of the Whole and give our Chief Director's report here. So to start off, before I get into our BSX update, just want to go through the N-Train National Board recommendations recap. So in April, I issued the final actions on the 6 National Board recommendations that were addressed at N-Train this past March. The complete verbiage on all 6 of those National Board recommendations can be found in ALOX 015-23. But the key points here from those 6 recommendations are the changing authorization of the Aguilette wear, reduction of the national dues for youth members, the amendment of Chapter 11, Section A-18 regarding anniversary streamers, establishing a pathway for honorable discharge and or retired members to join the Coast Guard Auxiliary. The 5th one, the amend the Auxiliary Manual referencing the Auxiliary Diversity Award. And finally, the Paddlecraft Operators Award points. All right, now getting the fun stuff, the BSX updates here. So with that said, we have the patrol order claims. I know last year there was a lot of issues with FSMS. I think we're slowly getting through those issues there. For those that have not seen, the ALOX 028-23 was released in mid-July, And details for the closeout of those timelines are in that for the fiscal year patrol order cutoffs there. So one thing I would like to just reinforce here is, as you know, those timelines, that is something that's not mandated by BSX. That is actually from CGA 3, which is our Office of Resource Management. And for those patrol orders, if you have patrol orders in the system, make sure that they are approved. If they're not, and you don't meet those timelines, those funds can be wiped. Also, because of the way the systems works, is if it is not approved, if it's approved, the money is obligated. So that kind of goes in if you had a patrol that was maybe 6 months ago, it was approved and it never was performed, you need to cancel that out so those funds can be freed for another patrol there. Just want to make sure, I don't see where Master Chief, did I get that right, Master Chief? I see some heads nodding there, so just want to make sure. All right. Next thing going up is our Operations Process Guide and Aviation Training Handbook updates. So if you've noticed, we've had four volumes of the Operations Process Guide have been all updated and signed. Volume 1, which is the general and surface operation. Volume 2, aviation. Volume 3, the telecommunications. And Volume 4, marine safety and security operations information. We also were able to update the Aviation Training Handbook, which replaced the Aviation Training Manual, which has not been updated since the 1990s. So I really want to call out Master Chief Park for his great work in there, but more importantly, he had an auxiliary staff that helped him with all those major updates. So I'd like to thank Commodore Roy Saboka, Commodore Larry Fletcher, Michelle Thornton, Commodore Dave Elliott, Commodore Kim Cole, and Commodore Rick Saunders. Without your work there, BSX would not be able to do that, and I would just like to give a round of applause for those members. All right, the auxiliary uniform and appearance policy update there. So as most of you know, in calendar year 22, we finished off the pilot program, which was in D1 Southern Region and D8 Coastal Region. The final policy changes have been reviewed with NACON, and we're earlier this week, and we're very close to promulgating that and signing that new policy there. Three big takeaways from there is the AWU, the alternate work uniform, which I see some folks, I saw Joe Espinino has that on there, so that's one of those. Second thing is the annual uniform inspection requirement, and then the need for men to be clean-shaven to participate in ceremonial events like parades and so forth there. So, moving on to an update on AUX Data 2. So as most of you know, I've mentioned this before, so in my remarks, the AUX Data 2 has a cab that meets every 2 weeks. There's constantly updates there, so just want to also mention if there's things that you want put it into AUX Data 2, make sure you are working through the cab, and then with those requests, they will put it on the priority list there and eventually work through there. So BSX is still actively working connecting the auxiliary IDs to AUX Data 2. We still have we still are working to get funding for that, but that is on our priority list. However, we do have some good news. If you remember back in N-Train, we were talking about the printers for the ID cards. We were finally able to acquire all the funds for that. Some printers are already in the DIROX offices there. Others are being ordered as we speak here. So if you do not, for those that don't have them, that have not given their information to Mr. Zig Wilson, please do so we can expedite the purchase and shipment of those printers for y'all. All right, moving on to training. So last week, unfortunately, we got some bad news from FORSCOM. Because of budget restraints, they're reducing our billets by 30% for fiscal year 24 as compared to fiscal year 23. We are currently working with FORSCOM to get some of those billets back. However, there is a deadline. We have to at least put our schedule in by the end of August, which you should see shortly here. But throughout the year, please look for your AUXs or your training officers, because we are going to be still striving to get those courses back. All right, moving on to some of the work, the auxiliary support within Coast Guard headquarters. As I mentioned, I believe last year at NACON, I talked about the Coast Guard auxiliary brand, and it's never been so great that I've seen within Coast Guard headquarters. Well, that continues to grow. I've got a list of at least 7 or 8 different missions here that the auxiliary has performed within Coast Guard headquarters, and I wanted to highlight 2 of them just to show you an example of the work that maybe goes unseen. So the Coast Guard Directors and Publication Divisions, which is known as CG 6-12, which is for manuals and publication review support. We had 2 auxiliaries, auxiliarist Aaron Atkins, assisted with the Director's Review, and auxiliarist Bartholomew Savitsky. He was instrumental in the forms testing. So together, these auxiliarists have worked on 40 Commandant instructions, reviews and updates, and also 80 Coast Guard forms that were reviewed and updated. Also, and in the Personnel Service Center for Personal Casualty Case Review Support, we had auxiliarist Ryan Berlin, who has worked diligently on this large project there. He had pretty much had to take 10 to 15 years of files associated with uniformed members' deaths and review. And so far, he has gone through 2 years' worth of all this data, which is just very meticulous and time-consuming. So without that help, that's just another shows. Those are two examples of how important the auxiliary is, specifically within Coast Guard headquarters. So moving on with I want to announce the new executive assistants to the Chief Dirox. There's 2 that we've designated since N-Train. D1 Northern Region, Auxiliarist James C. Griffith. He's the auxiliary of the Aviation Training Program Administration. He joins BSS Training Manager David Goff and EA Auxiliary Training Program Administrator Jenny Stack for those duties there for C-School Logistics. Also, we have D1 Southern Region, Auxiliarist John Bigrow as the EA for BSX-1 Website Management. He has provided outstanding support to us for more than 2 years, and formal designation was more appropriate. So I want to welcome those 2 new EAs to the BSX staff. I know that my staff is truly grateful for all that you have done. In closing, I want to thank you for all that you do for our nation and our Coast Guard.
Thank you, Captain. We will now hear from our VNACO, Mary Kirkwood.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to see everyone. It's good to be back in person. I'd like to give a quick update on a couple of areas that report to me. I'm not going to steal their thunder from OPCOM, but I do want to give a couple of highlights. First, our Chief Counsel, Commodore Cream, in addition to providing guidance to our district attorneys and legal services, his team continue to review national documents and provide legal eagle eyes to ensure we comply with the AUX manual and also, honestly, keep us out of trouble. So thank you for that. Do a great job. Very important work, often done in the background. Commodore Schultz and NACO for Diversity Inclusion, working a lot on the NACO 3-Star Award for Diversity. So far, 48% of the units have completed and will be receiving the NACO award. 13 districts improved their award from last year, their award total from last year, which is very significant. Districts Alaska and Florida have a 100% completion rate. That is the largest and the smallest of our districts, which means that anybody in between can also achieve this. So, we have 42 members who've taken all 4 of the diversity and inclusion FEMA courses, which is being tracked in AUX Data 2. So these are courses specific in FEMA that are specific to something around diversity and inclusion. They continue to have town halls monthly with over 500 members in attendance over the first 6 months, which is huge. That's quite a hauling there. And they have a National Diversity and Inclusion Facebook that has almost 3,000 followers, which is up 116% from last year. So they're doing some good work there, some good outreach. For administrative services, Commodore Mihalchik has obviously the 2 new directorates that are just about a year old. They were stood up last year. They're both doing well. The W Directorate, you'll hear more about just with rolling out the minutes form. So please, DCOs, make sure that your districts and divisions and flotillas are starting to use that form. They will be teaching awards writing and awards processing for the staff training this afternoon. And of course, building a repository for housing the important auxiliary documents. And the O Directorate, Investigations, is working closely with Coast Guard Investigative Services. They've been tasked with 3 different projects they're working on. So it's nice to see that relationship building once more, and I'm sure it'll be stronger than before. Unfortunately, Commodore David Barber for Finance is not able to be here. Thank you to Donna Miller, his deputy, who's going to be stepping in this week. The Finance Group continues to work with DNACOs, ANACOs, and directors to track their expenses towards budget. He's created the first financial reporting dashboard. I know DNACO Tiny Singler has been working with that, and it will be rolled out to everybody soon. And the good news is the team is going to be working to process our travel orders and claims for this event. So the hope is that we all get paid within a couple of weeks. So hats off to what they're doing there. In terms of the National Strategic Plan, this is where safety, our safety director, Commodore Bob Schaefer, comes in. There are 12 milestones for safety. About 50% of them are now completed. 1 is on hold, and the rest are in progress right now. Currently, he is preparing the 2023 safety survey, so that should be out in the next couple of months. And he will give this news. I'm going to hold off because he wants to give this news himself at OPCOM, but something special coming up. 2 task forces were created out of conversations at N-Train, and I want to talk about them. The first is the Help Wanted Task Force. This is to expedite filling active duty requests for auxiliary assistance throughout the country. What we were hoping for is a fairly automated Help Wanted request for forces program that integrates with AUX Data 2, and that it's across all districts and it could be used by active duty or the auxiliary to request help, additional help from auxiliary. We've had members on the team from D11 North and D11 South, 5 North, the H Directorate, ANACO for IT, and also from BSX office. So it's a nice, robust, round group with lots of good talent in there. We looked at their different process. So D11 North and South and 5 North and South also have some sort of a program. D North is very labor intensive right now compared to the other 2. 5 North process is semi-automated. They're working towards a little more automation, but they've got a little less labor intensive. We looked at the BSX form that they use when people, active duty units, ask for auxiliary assistance. D11 South is much further along than the other districts in terms of working out something similar to what we want for the nation. It's much more automated, really working on it as more of a job board. They've done a tremendous amount of work. One of the things they did was I'm going to say this, and I know Linda's going to just cringe, cleaning up the skills bank. So apparently, and I'm probably not using the right terminology, but apparently when skills bank, the skills jobs codes went over from AUX Data 1 to AUX Data 2, they didn't really track well. And so Boz worked with the IT team to get that, the ADT, AUX Data 2 team, and got those fixed, which is good. And then we're hoping to do that throughout every district so that we'll have good data to pull from as we move forward. And with that, they've encouraged their members to add skills, clean up the job codes and skills that they have in AUX Data 2. We actually, our last meeting was with Salesforce, who AUX Data 2 comes from, the company that it comes from. We looked at the different elements that they could provide for us, perhaps, in augmenting AUX Data 2 to provide a better handle on how we could use this information. They assured us that all the information we need is currently in AUX Data 2. It's just a build. They showed us a mapping system where you could say, we need Chef here, and you can draw a circle for 100 miles or 4 districts or whatever you want, and see everybody who's qualified as Chef in that area, and then that help wanted could go to those people. So it really integrated. It's a great group. This is a work in progress. It's not going to be an overnight process, but certainly making great headway, and I'm real pleased to see the work that's being done there. The second one is the onboarding task force. This was designed or implemented really to help us initially speed up how long it takes to get our specialty members through, our cyber folks, our chaplains. However, we have now morphed it, and we're really working on how do we speed up the process to get all members through the onboarding process. With that, we are recommending that we eliminate the new member course. We have the BC program, so we don't BC2 program, so we don't need the new member course. So that's going to be coming. We're talking about who needs a boating course. Does everybody need a boating course in the beginning, or do you need a boating course when you go to be VE or boat crew? We have the T Directorate working on a couple of things. They're reviewing the BC2 course right now, trying to streamline it a little better. We're also hoping that it could be. They're looking at how we can make it an instructor-led program, so it's a workshop, so it's not just online. We know that online courses for some of our folks is difficult for their own skill competence or just not having internet access or difficult. I know we have some members have to go to the library to do their internet, and that's an hour, half an hour or an hour at a time. So that's going to be, I think, great. So T Directorate, Rob is helping with that, working forwarding that. So hopefully that will be, there's a new member application at BSX. It's being held because they're trying to still determine the process for bringing people with green cards on board, so that's in the future as well. We're looking right now at who onboards or processes those specialty areas like chaplains and cyber who have specific requirements for their jobs they're coming into. Probably not at flotilla level. We're looking at division or district or something level like that. Aux Data 2 is automatically generating, or we're hoping for, is generating a new member letter out to everybody. And then Commodore Davies is working on somehow inviting new members after a couple of months to an Aux Data 2 course to really get them up and running and comfortable with Aux Data 2. And that's such a key point, as you know, for our auxiliaries. We're looking at the new member involvement handbook. And our biggest challenge we're working on also is ALAC cards. We know some of the people coming in right away need ALAC cards as soon as we can for their programs they're going to be doing. And then the big thing is that Rob's got a whole team working on mentoring. So it's mentoring, 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 mentoring. A lot of our folks end up stalled because nobody's pushing them or encouraging them or helping them through it. And so mentoring is just key. So lots going on. I want to thank you for your attention, and have a great West Year week. We have a lot going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Kirkwood. We have now NACO Atlantic East and Mission Support, Alan Fred.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Orlando. Welcome to NACON. It's just so darn good to see people face to face, and I don't mean Zoom to Zoom face, real honest to goodness face to face. The fellowship opportunities are fantastic. This morning, before I go through some of the highlights of the activity in Land East, I just want to give you a statistic. We have in Land East 12,120 members, which represents a net increase for the year of 422 members. Thank you to everyone in Land East and national staff who have supported this effort. And at this point, let me go through some of the highlights for our 5 districts, starting with 1 North. Excuse me. Some of the things that they have been involved in, participation in this fall's Massachusetts Scout Jamboree. They have been working very hard in energizing their VE program throughout the district. They are collaborating with NOAA in developing an ENC-based navigation course. They participated in a National Safe Boating Week event at Boston Public Gardens. You know, to me, that was pretty unique. For those of you who have been in Boston, I'm not sure there's a lake there at Boston Gardens, but to have something like that in a somewhat of a unique arena, to me, was noteworthy. They are holding virtual D-trains, S-trains, and they are working with the District Waterways Chief to promote ATON missions. They also have some of their AUP students who completed summer internships this summer. And they are one of the districts inland east that has had a positive net increase. Moving south to one south, the reopening of their DIROCS office, new DIROCS, new OTO reporting has been a real boon to them. Significant improvement has occurred in communications and operations, kind of getting back to business as usual. Commodore West and Chief of Staff Klasik wanted me to express on their behalf the support, the appreciation for the support of Division 1 North's DIROCS and DIROCS staff during this interim period. Recruitment, retention, and mentorship are points of emphasis for 1 South. They too have participated in a number of what I consider interesting and unique events. Fleet Week in New York, I think everyone's familiar with that. If nothing else, you see it on the news. But it's quite a good opportunity for participation and exposure to the flotilla. They also participated in the Jones Beach Air Show. Good reason to go to the beach, as far as I'm concerned. They also planked 2 new AUP units, one at the Merchant Marine Academy and then another at Norwich University. And again, 1 South is one of the districts that had a net positive gain, has a net positive gain. Moving to 5 North, they have continued with their Bravo 1 jobs needs and help wanted. Commodore Kirkwood alluded to that just a moment ago. They have 162 of their members who regularly support Coast Guard units and platforms. That's quite a commitment on the part of those in 5 North. Bravo Zulu to those folks. Another unique mission, so to speak, or activity of 5 North, is for years they have presented a marlin spike knife to the honor graduates of the company, recruit companies there at Cape May. They have continued to do that. They also provide to the families of the recruits who are graduating information regarding the auxiliary. So I think that's a very worthwhile activity that I wanted to mention. And then they are also in the process of, in collaboration with the Chester County, Pennsylvania Aviation Department, standing up an aux air flotilla. So, thank you for that. And last but not least, 5 North is celebrating the 80th anniversary of their publication Topside. 80 continuous years of publication. Gosh, something almost as old as me. But so, congratulations on that. District 5 South, recruiting and retention continue to be a primary focus. D5 South will hold their second 2023 D-Train next month. And they have a couple of unique class offerings in that D-Train. They're going to do an in-person ICS 300. They are also going to do ICS G191, which is the ICS EOC interface class. And that's going to be a class that's going to be composed of auxiliarists, local law enforcement, local fire departments, bringing together a diverse group of individuals, to take advantage of this training opportunity. 5 South also continues with their AUP initiative. We had 4 VMI cadets receive direct commissions. A Virginia Tech graduate cadet received a direct commission. So the AUP program is really producing outstanding results in 5 South and in other districts as well. The kind of unique thing about the VMI is the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard traveled to Lexington, Virginia to participate in the commissioning of these 4 VMI cadets. Excuse me. Another unique activity that occurs in 5 South is the Ocean City, Maryland flotilla. Each week during the summer on the boardwalk there in Ocean City has a PA booth where they teach people how to tie knots. Yeah, kind of a neat thing to do. Again, 5 South is one of the districts that has a net increase. District 7, their membership is now over 4,000. That's not really a big deal. What the big deal in that number is they're back to their numbers, pre-COVID numbers. So they have bounced back. So D7, Bravo, Zulu for that. They also have, working on their contingency communication plans. All of us know what happens here in Florida and along the Atlantic coast. It's hurricane season, so they are very, very much involved in that. They are reporting that their member participation rates are increasing. Training activities are ongoing to continue qualifying members in the RBS mission areas and other support roles. They are experiencing an increase in members seeking aux air involvement and qualifications, and experiencing an increase in requests for augmentation. I'm watching the clock, I'm in trouble. And I don't get a Southern accent discount. Sorry about that, folks. I am going to, obviously I'm involved with Mission Support Force Com. I'm going to let Todd and the directors of AGH&T share with you all of the good work. Commodore Kirkwood mentioned that. Thank you, the numbers are red, I'm in trouble.
Thank you, Commodore Fred. We want to hear from NACON, Atlantic West, and Operations, Patrick Ferry.
Good morning. It's great to be here, great to see everybody. Excuse me. And it's a privilege to stand up here and represent the 5,082 auxiliaries that live in the nation's heartland, Districts 8 and 9. I want to give you a brief rundown of what's going on in each of the 6 districts that make up Atlantic West, and if time allows, hopefully we'll get into some of the good work that's going on in operation. So let's start east to west, and with the 9th Eastern, Commodore Rich Evans and his Chief of Staff, Steve Botsford. They're reporting that their Relationship with Sector Buffalo is stronger than it ever has been before. They're being asked quite often to join in exercises and training events with them, helping to meld that relationship with the active duty. They're also supporting local agencies, fire, medical services, emergency services, and Native American services. And they're focusing on response to potential environmental emergencies on Lake Erie and the St. Lawrence River. And this is an interesting comment coming out of 9 Eastern. Commodore Evans reports that wearing the alternate work uniform has proven helpful into integrating into challenging diversity situations. Apparently, the AWU is very similar to uniforms worn by some services that are very trusted by other agencies that are trusted by some communities that heretofore have been closed to the auxiliary. So it kind of shows you the AWU can be a good tool in a lot of different areas. ATON and PATON activity is checking full swing. 100 of aids have been checked. Discrepancy reports have been made. Shifting over to the Central, Commodore Patty Matrowski can't be with us tonight, but with the conference, she's got a work commitment, but her Chief of Staff, Commodore Mark Villeneuve, is with us representing her, and they've advised that they've held a couple of combined training events within the district, which have resulted in several members being qualified into the boat crew program, several members being qualified as telecommunication operators, and several members getting their triennial check rides taken care of. So it kind of shows you if one flotilla can't shoulder the load, if we combine our efforts, great things can happen. Public education courses are going strong, and there's an uptick in UPV training in the 9th Central. Members have supported open houses at various stations, giving tours of the stations, performing vessel checks at the stations, and more importantly, manning recruiting booths, telling members of the public, telling them about the Coast Guard mission, the Coast Guard auxiliary mission, and helping with recruiting on both sides of the line, active duty and auxiliary. And they are proud to report that 46 new members have been inducted in the auxiliary in the first 6 months of the year. That's a 28% increase from a year ago. What's really interesting is 18 of those people came through AAMS. So, you know, if your unit's not really paying attention to AAMS, it's a great tool, you know, do something to make an effort to make sure those prospects are being followed up. In the Western, Commodore Sonny Thatch and his Chief of Staff, Tim Deary, their combined crews from several divisions have manned 2 stations over the summer, continue to man them as the active duty crews are pulled away to support Operation Vigilant Sentry down in Key West. This has resulted in several SARs being executed by those crews and people being saved and found. They also responded to a plane crash up in Wisconsin that took place during an aviation show. Ran a safety zone so that the first responders could get to where they needed to go and do their work. So bravo Zulu on that. The 8th Eastern Region, Pete Scamardo and his Chief of Staff, George Tate, report that for the second time in 4 years, a Sea School rodeo was hosted in Houston, Texas, very successful. 3 sea schools were taught simultaneously, bringing auxiliaries from all over the country into Houston to not only benefit from the training, but also to benefit from meeting new people and networking. Aviation, I'm sorry, I said 8th Eastern, didn't I? We're talking about the 8th Central. Pete also, in Houston, Galveston, they've had an event working with the Wounded Warrior organization, which gave the auxiliary a lot of good publicity. And Division 4 down in New Orleans is constantly working with the active duty training for hopefully not any hurricanes to be experienced this year. 8th Eastern, Commodore Chris Whitaker and his Chief of Staff, Ron Bono, proud to announce that they've recruited 86 new members into the auxiliary this year. 16% increase, with the largest coming from northern Alabama in the Huntsville area. I don't know what's in the water up there, Chris, but you ought to bottle it and start selling it up in the store. So great job there. They also report that their aviation group has 20 people participating in it. They have 2 planes that are active and hope to have 2 more planes up and online here within the near future. The 8th Western, Commodore Brock Stevens and his Chief of Staff, Bob Arisman. 8 members supported Sector Upper Mississippi during the floods in Minnesota earlier this year, contributing 385 hours acting as field observers from St. Paul, Minnesota to St. Louis. Great job there. Members, I don't know if anybody here gets the Reservist magazine, the Coast Guard Reservist magazine. You may have noted that an ICS exercise was kind of highlighted in there. Heartland Blues. The auxiliary was mentioned in the article, I think 3 or 4 times, and 8 members from the 8th Western staffed that event, worked side by side with the reserves and the active duty, preparing for any contingency that might arise. So that's a thumbnail sketch. Great job, fellas and gals, and really appreciate what you do. I know the clock's running down. I do want to recognize NACO, Rick Saunders and his deputy, Anthony Marzano, and the staff. They have done a tremendous job this year and continue to do that, shepherding us through southwest border. The mission there, Q Department learned a lot from that. We're taking what we learned, and hopefully the next time we have a huge deployment, we will be able to execute that deployment more effectively and more efficiency. They've completed the gap analysis. The report's been presented to XCOM, and Deputy Anthony Marzano will be giving you all more detail about that here later this morning. There's been enhancements in the Q Department too in the SITREP dashboard. If you've never gone there, it's a link on the left side of the webpage. Tells us a lot about what's going on around the country in terms of major disasters. Would urge you all to go there and take a look at that and maybe become a tool for you. The Prevention Department has a tremendous amount of updating going on. We hope that Kim and her crew can get that updating approved and put together. They're working diligently on it. We're going to see some improvements in America Waterways Watch. There's an SOP being written. The Sea Partners training manuals being updated. A lot of good things going on. A lot of people have been qualified as ATON verifiers at 2 sea schools this year, held on the east and the west coast. And this is interesting. A beta test has been held, online UPV training in District 9. And once that those folks get through their practicals and we tune that up a little bit, we hope that gets presented nationally. Sven Dobler and his 2 deputies, Drew Wilkins and James Sullivan, contacting our foreign partners, holding Zoom meetings with them to help spread the word and talk common problems and training with one another. Great job supporting Operation Vigilant Sentry. We have 350 linguists in the program, speak over 56 languages, and are constantly augmenting the active duty with their translation needs. And lastly, the Operations Directorate, Roy Savoca and his deputy, Larry Fletcher, working on a PQS for an unmanned aerial systems program. Watch for that in the future. It's going to be not in the near future, but it's coming. Will be a great tool to help us augment the active duty. And they're also investigating why so many vessels, facilities are showing up as non-operational in Oxdata. We hope to have an answer for that soon. Communications, push-to-talks out there. All of the DCOs have received information on it, information on how to get on board with push-to-talk. Great way to communicate is on the communications website. And I will leave the rest of that up to Rick and Anthony and the directors as they get up at OPCOM to talk about what they're doing. So with that, thank you for your attention. I have 9 seconds left. I will close with the way I started my remarks at NTRAIN, and that is ops is tops and west is best. Thank you all.
You were actually -9 when you saw that.
Thank you, Commodore. We will now hear from NACO Pacific Area and Recreational Boating Safety, Tiny Singler.
Well, good morning, everyone. I always say when somebody asks me, how you doing today? I woke up this morning, it's got to be a great day. So what I am is the luckiest person in the world to be in the PAC area and have all the individual DCOs, their chiefs of staff, the DIROC's offices with some of the best people in the world to work with, and the RBS group. What more could I ask for? So with that, as you can tell, I got a little southern accent in me. I don't know where it came from, okay? Could have been Texas and Louisiana, but we got Oregon, so I'm gonna start talking on it. In the D11 North area, which basically we're talking about Northern California and Utah and Nevada.
Nevada.
See that? That's what I have to put up with. All right. Anyway, it has been fantastic. They had their D train kind of late because that what happened back when they were originally going to have it is that they had a snowstorm at Torrance Pass there and nobody could get there. So anyway, I went to it. It was enjoyable. They had over 120 members attend, and it was just fantastic training, you know, and what more can anyone ask for? The request for forces being handled by D11 South's part of the makeup of helping with the national side for setting up an automated program. And, you know, we looked at these things not long ago, and Boz said, I think I can do stuff to help, and he tremendously has done that. And he gets with our people all the time. We're going to do it if Boz makes it. I don't know. He's just running a little late. So also to D11 North and South, D11 North and South have been working on this request for forces for a few years now. It was started by the admiral there. And you know what it is that it is a program that's going to help all of our nation at some point here, and hopefully it does get fully automated. And it's cleaning up the skills bank, which Boz has done a great job, but all of us, it's making all of us take a look at it too. And so I'm kind of going in between 11 North and South. I'm not trying to make them the same because they're definitely not the same. They're different aspects and stuff. But I want to understand, everybody to understand how much we work together as a group to get things accomplished, okay? There has been a lot of course activity going on with participation in helo ops and stuff in the north. Between San Francisco Bay, Monterey Bay, and San Pablo Bay. And we have this in every district from all of the fleet weeks and everything else. So I love seeing the re-engagement, and that's what's starting to happen. We're getting out there, we're getting our people. I always say I hear all the time somebody say that this member hasn't done anything for a long time, or they haven't talked to them. Pick up the phone. Let's get them re-engaged, and this is the time. So what is finishing up here on D11 North also had 57 new members this year so far. I think overall, I just figured it up, we've most probably had close to about 220, 230 new members in the PAC area, which is a heck of a growth, so we're all thinking the same thing. Also part of D11 South, of course, they're working on the engagement factor for the request for forces, national help desk, whatever's going to be the final determination on the name of it. Looking at a release, as Boz puts it, of rollout of 2.0, release 2.0, and which is basically having it district-wide data cleanup and having all of these skills set up in there. And a lot of us, so just to get it close, when we originally started signing up people, we weren't real good as a whole of making them make sure they put down all their skills. We'd say, give us 3 skills or whatever, and that's what got entered into AD2, so it wasn't always really that correct. Also, too, 11 South is working on program management to clean up their district calendar and to have everything on there. And I've noticed more and more that each of the districts are doing a great job of starting to put what's going on with their flotillas and their divisions and the district onto their district calendars where the members can go directly to it. In D13, which is Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Idaho, it's been entering the busy season for everybody, but for them, for boating. And auxiliaries completed a security zone for the Portland Rose Fest, and now are getting ready for Seafair in Seattle. These are major events, and we're talking about multiple facilities and multiple people ashore and on the water. In some cases there, you'll have as many as 40 members doing it at the same time. It's like pulling hair, trying to make sure that all these pieces fit together. But they're doing a great job, and it's making what I always say, it makes us keep active in our mind. In Hawaii, I'm so glad to see Mike here this morning, Commodore Keurig. I'm sure everybody's heard about the Maui fires. It's an unfortunate deal. It's prayers and hats are off that it doesn't keep expanding in fatalities, but I am so glad you're here though, Mike. And okay, we did have one member that lost their home, and but luckily nobody was hurt. So that's a blessing there in itself. But Hawaii is just not Hawaii. We're talking about Guam. We're talking about American Samoa. We're talking about Philippines, a detachment. I mean, if you talk about the area, I mean, forget about the whole PAC area here. Let's just start going west. That's a heck of an area. What a commitment to trying to keep all that up, and with communications that are not always the best in the world in reaching out. And of course, what the big things they had an AMLOC in September. Maui is planning on adding 2 patrol facilities, the first since 2015. Good job. All right, and Ox Scout program has begun on Oahu with the establishment of the first ship. Great job. And NACON 3-star award submission has begun with endorsement and active participation and improvement of participation by leadership and members of the American Samoa and Japan. Alaska, getting ready to go there very soon. It's amazing to me. I love the areas to go. It's, you know, for a country boy, they're definitely different, okay? But they have been active in promoting the activities of the auxiliary and working to fulfill the goals of their operational plan. Missions of critical importance have been highly successful, including the chaplain support and culinary assistance programs. Their public education, which is fantastic. They have met with over 600 students being trained in one area alone, which is Sitka. And the state-sponsored Kids Don't Forget Afloat program has grown and now has more requests for sessions than the U.S. Coast Guard is currently able to provide. That is a great job. Reaching the kids, that's where it's at. I always say if you can reach them, what's going to happen? They're going to tell their parents to put on the life jackets and everything else. That's fantastic on that. I'm not going to, also too, just a couple other things. They have been really active out there, and the surface operations off to a great start. And the ACE to Navigation Verifier program stalled for years, okay, but is now back operational, and that's great. That's a great job. And member training has been very active, and they played host to a successful auxiliary mid-level officers course too. Great job on that. Ethic course is needed, and it's being brought to the attention, and there's been plans to take care of that. Look, I'm not going to steal the thunder of my most favorite group and what I love to do. And don't get me wrong, I love being on the water. I love all the other aspects of the auxiliary. I love recruiting. I love signing people up. I love training. I love training our people. But man, when it comes to recreational boating safety, I love the fire out of it. When Gus told me when we first came on, he said, "You're going to be an RBS," and I'm going, I think he thought I was going to go, And instead I went, ah, ha, ha, okay? And that's the way I feel, because I'm going to leave you with this. I know I'm getting real close here, because I'm going to let the RBS group talk about when they have the OPCOM, all the great items that's going on. But remember this, when we talk to the public, the recreational boating public, all right, I always tell them, if you just retain a little bit of what I've told you, I've either saved your life, saved a member of your family, saved a friend, or somebody you do not even know. And with that, I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Great job, Tom.
All right, up next, NACO Information Technology and Planning, Linda Merriman.
Leave the clicker. Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so change of pace. I don't get to talk about all the wonderful things the areas are doing. I get to talk about all the wonderful things that my directorates and groups are doing. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to share some highlights with you. I'm going to start with the information technology side. Under Assistant National Commodore Susan Davies, the User Support and Services Directorate is led by Director Jen Austin and her deputy Bill Ballard. Their project to transfer member training results from the Auxiliary Online Classroom, Moodle, to AUX Data 2 is progressing well. The next step is to pull basic qualification course test results directly from Moodle for upload into AUX Data 2. And by doing that, we eliminate the need for members to take the BQC2 tests in the separate National Testing Center system. And after that completes, they'll determine if the Auxiliary Learning Management System data can be added to the automation. I believe Amanda Constant will have an update on that for you at OPCOM. A critical service provided to members, the Coast Guard, and the public by the IT group is the help desks. In Q2, the legacy help desk team processed 571 tickets, which was down from 673 in Q1. The AUX Data 2 Tier 1 support group processed 1,100 service requests, up from 991 in Q1. And despite implementation of several password reset improvements, login issues remain an issue. They continue to search for ways to make additional process improvements in that. Speaking of the help desks, implementation of a new national help desk service, which was acquired to replace the unsupported legacy software that was over 10 years old and was no longer being updated by the vendor, completed and it went live successfully on 20 July. The user interface is easy to use. There's links to all the knowledge base articles on the help desk homepage. Access remains via the National Help Desk button on the website homepage. The communication services officers have been asked to check their unit websites to determine if they need to modify referral links to the new help desk, especially for the sites that are outside of our WOW system. In addition to the AUX 10 Information Services Officer C-School class that was offered here earlier this week, a virtual AUX 10 finished in June with an impressive 90% exam pass rate. This was the first course to split content delivery into East Coast and West Coast time zones, providing more schedule options for the attendees, which we believe directly contributed to the improved success rate. To address the demand for more AUX 10 courses, a Train the Trainer project recently completed, resulting in 2 new instructors, including one who is bilingual for Spanish-speaking students. A new IS Officer seminar series is under development. It will be offered virtually through the Moodle classroom. Each segment will be 10 to 15 minutes long on a specific topic, such as how to view a member record and how to prepare and submit an activity log. This is the first step in creating a basic IS Officer training course focused not on the mechanics of the AUX Data 2 system, but rather on accurate mission understanding and activity reporting. It's designed to give the IS officers the right tools they need to best support their members. The other half of IT is the Computer Software and Systems Directorate, led by Director Amanda Constant and Deputies Carlos Arenas, who heads the software development, operations, and program management areas, and Deputy Joe Espino, who handles internal and external cybersecurity initiatives. The cybersecurity organization continues to grow with 2 new divisions, Education Awareness and Policy Compliance, which were established in the second quarter. Currently, they have 40 auxiliary cyber candidates being processed by the Coast Guard Cyber for security credentials, with more in the pipeline. A new personnel qualification standard for auxiliary cyber document examiners was submitted to Coast Guard Cyber and the Coast Guard Office of Port and Facility Compliance for review, concurrence, and approval. And the final review of that PQS is in progress by the Coast Guard. All WOW sites, that's websites without webmasters, it wouldn't make sense the other way around, are now using the more secure HTTPS encryption protocol. This will prevent unauthorized third parties from pretending to be WOW websites or from modifying existing website content. The next steps to enhance security include adding the WOW member zone login to the Cognito authentication system and migrating WOW to its own separate server. Okay, moving to the other side of the shop, on the performance and student program side, under Assistant National Commodore Pete Jensen, the Student Programs Directorate is led by Director Jean McNamara and Deputy Jacob Thayer. I'm so pleased to hear my colleagues talking a lot about the Auxiliary University program and about the Sea Scout program, so I'll give you a couple of more updates in those areas. The AUP program continues to grow with 260 students in 57 institutions. 31 AUP students are interning with Coast Guard units this summer, which is a program record. So far this year, 12 AUP graduates have applied for Coast Guard Officer Candidate School, with 11 accepted. Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, is the newest brick-and-mortar AUP unit. It is the second resident AUP unit outside of Atlantic East and the first in Atlantic West. The team continues to work with Elizabeth City State University, Texas A&M, and the New Jersey Institute of Technology to move each of them closer to submission for charter as AUP units. The Auxiliary Sea Scout program has 634 members and 32 auxiliary-sponsored ships. The Coast Guard selected 4 Sea Scouts for the Coast Guard Cutter Eagle Summer Cruise and 3 for this summer's Academy Introduction mission. Their popular Coast Guard Tech Talk online workshops continue to receive an enthusiastic response from Sea Scouts and auxiliary flotillas. Recent topics were NOAA map making and Beyond Maps, the Evolving Earth Sciences. They were recorded and are available on demand from the Aux Scout YouTube channel. The S Directorate's review of the Academy Admissions Partner Program roster is now complete. There are 290 confirmed active auxiliary partners in the program. That represents about 25% of the total partner group. Of our auxiliary group, they're providing half of the AIM staff this summer. And after a 10-month hiatus, the Academy is opening applications for new partners. Work continues with them to identify districts that are candidates for recruiting more Academy auxiliary admissions partners. The Performance Measurement Directorate is led by Director Kevin Redden and Deputy Harry Parsons. All their regularly scheduled reports were produced and posted on time and are accessible after login on the MDirectorate webpage. The Strategic Plan Tracking Team continued monitoring organization-wide progress. Of 110 total milestones on the current plan, 42, which is 38%, are reported complete. The Q1 2023 member exit and new member survey reports were distributed in early July. As has been typical, response rates for both of those remain in the low 20% range. The 2022 value of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Report was produced according to the approved methodology and was posted to the National Commodore's webpage in late July. This is the 9th in a series of annual reports that quantify the monetary value of the contributions of the auxiliary to the work of the Coast Guard. The principal finding for 2022 is that for every $1 that the Coast Guard spends on the auxiliary, it receives back just under $10 in services and cash equivalents. This is an improvement from 2021's $8.76 return, but still significantly lower than 2019's $12.54 return. The 2022 numbers reflect the auxiliary's slowly growing recovery from the significant impact of COVID-19 restrictions in 2020 and 2021, as well as the unexpected impact of the delayed transition to the Coast Guard's financial systems modernization solution, which limited all but essential air and surface patrols into 2022. The source for most of the data that comes into the valuation report is Aux Data 2. There are inherent limitations when we use self-reported data, and most likely that results in undervaluing auxiliary contributions. To provide the best possible data for this report, it's vital that we all emphasize accurate and complete reporting by members of their activities into Aux Data 2. And finally, Information Technology and Planning is conducting 3 workshops here this weekend. They are a demo and review of reports readily available to every member in Aux Data 2, how to access and use the metrics reports and tools provided by the Performance Measurement Directorate, and an overview of how flotillas may charter, grow, and sustain a successful Sea Scout ship. Each workshop will be presented twice, and if your schedule allows, I hope you'll be able to attend some of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. We will now hear from President of the National Association of Commodores, Robert Lauer.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Orlando from the National Association of Commodores. Getting started, I'd like to recognize my staff, and that's Mr. Commodore Robert Schaefer, Commodore Peter Jensen, Commodore Belmore, Commodore Godshall, Commodore Morris, and Commodore Rudiger. Without their help, I would have had a very tough time over the last 2 years trying to organize and move forward in a direction that would positively affect both you folks and the NEXCOM. New membership, our numbers are going up. Those folks in the audience that haven't had the opportunity to join NAC, I would very much appreciate a visit from you. Myself or Pete or Carolyn in the audience would be happy to talk to you about membership. One of the things that we've run into over time is our dues are $50. $50 covers the lifetime dues, and what we've discovered is it costs us $150 to put the names on the monument. So we'll talk about the monument in a minute, but you see there's a discrepancy there, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to fix that, but I just thought that we might like to know that. So what is that? Maybe for those folks that don't know what the monument is, we have a beautiful monument constructed. It's sitting in Detroit. We continue to update it with the names of the folks that have crossed the bar. It's a beautiful thing. The plan moving forward is to update that with the latest information and then move it over to a company that's near Cape May, New Jersey, with the plan to locate it on the training station, hopefully by the end of this year. We'll see how that goes. As most of you have seen, or you saw in your email, I put out a request for donations to try to help me do that, because we've discovered that I didn't have enough cash. I had enough cash to do some part of that, but I didn't have enough cash to do all of it. And I'm still, I could still use some additional funds, but we feel that we have enough money now to move the thing to Cape May and begin the process of doing some groundwork and trying to make that happen. And one of the concerns that we all had was, how do we support that thing after it gets down there? And Joe Lesniewski has graciously volunteered some of his group to help us initiate, communicate, locate, and maintain that monument once it gets to Cape May. So my thanks are Joe and his group for volunteering to make that happen. As I just said, we're going to probably do a little bit more fundraising to make sure that I have enough, but we'll see what happens. The latest estimate is yet to cross my desk. What is our plan as NAC? When all of us got to the end of our careers as district commodores, it's almost like you fall off the edge and you go into a black hole someplace. And we've lost the continuity to the skills of all of those folks that are changing a portion of their career. And NAC is committed to bring those folks back, make sure that we make them, engage them, make them feel wanted in our organization, and provide that background and that knowledge that they have to all of you and to NEXCOM. So that really is our mission. And I've talked a lot to some of the past NACOs and some of the past DCOs. Everybody's interested. And in fact, I got an email from a guy that's been out of office a long time. And he said, I want to help. And so that, that means, and he was one of many. And that means to me that there are folks out there that can add value that we ought to have at the table. And what we're going to work on is trying to put together a mechanism to get them to sit at the table. That is our plan. We'll talk more about that on Saturday when we have our luncheon. At that luncheon, there is going to be an election. And what I hope is that I will see all of you there, and we will move forward. So if there's not any questions for me, I would be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Glendie. Thank you, Commodores.
All right, and I'd like to introduce Anthony Marzano, Deputy NACO Response and Prevention, for his gap analysis presentation. Do you want to go up or stay here? Up to you. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm pleased this morning to provide an overview and summary of the 23 auxiliary gap analysis. This was the fourth and the most complete gap analysis that the auxiliary has ever conducted since we started these efforts in 2016. And it sought to identify the most significant opportunities that we have to enhance Coast Guard mission capabilities through augmentation. The gap survey sought to identify skills and qualifications that are currently being used, the adequacy of those current augmentation levels, and which of these are most needed across the Coast Guard commands and units that responded to the survey. The survey process collected information on local auxiliary needs, with the reported information being synthesized to provide overall rankings of the capabilities requested most often by the Coast Guard. These rankings are intended to provide national and district leadership and staff with an understanding of needs to assist them in prioritizing programmatic support and development. The survey was conducted in two phases, the first consisting of sectors and air stations, and the second with remaining Coast Guard elements that were able to be identified. The first phase included responses that encompassed all 37 sectors, or 100%, as well as 21 of 24, or 88% of air stations. Phase 2 was the first time that a gap analysis effort included Coast Guard units beyond sectors and air stations. As the auxiliary continues to be tasked for augmentation support, filling roles that go well beyond the traditional recreational boating safety missions, project staff wanted to ensure that every Coast Guard element had the chance to have input in the survey if they wished to do so. This being the first time, it's easy to be a little discouraged when out of 73 surveys that went out in phase 2, we had 16 respond, or 22%. However, it's important to remember that this was the first time, and it's taken us a few gap analysis to consistently get 100% from sectors. So this is still value added when accounting for the fact that some of the offices that we reached in phase 2 had never had direct contact with the auxiliary before. Survey respondents rated the level and priority of need for 88 defined capabilities, and those ratings were assigned scores which were totaled to produce the rankings. And the rankings are displayed on the slide that you see here. This is the top 10, which is actually 9. It's 9 because as we look in data analysis, we basically come to realize that although we surveyed the need for coxswain and crew separately, they're really linked together, because a coxswain with no crew versus crew with no coxswain, there's, really we have to treat those the same. Of the top 10 capabilities identified, and you see the changes from the 2019 gap analysis report, we'll talk about trend analysis in just a moment. Of the top 10 ranked capabilities identified in 2019, 8 remain, although a few have shifted position within the list itself. As we begin to examine trends, the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic is arguably the single biggest factor that appears to have driven changes in mission demand for the auxiliary over the past 4 years. Pandemic impacts likely impeded our ability to develop some of the needed resources to close the gaps since 2019. Coast Guard recruiting specialists rose from being tied in 43rd ranking in 2019 to 8th in 2023. This appears to be clearly related to the Coast Guard's recruiting challenges, as well as a direct result of the pandemic. Coast Guard Recruiting Command recognizes that the Coast Guard is facing a recruiting crisis that will have cascading implications on the service for years to come, and more auxiliary support is needed for recruiting. Psychologist was not a capability that was included on the survey list in 2019, yet it makes the top 10 list this year in 9th ranking. As mental health issues have become much more prevalent post-pandemic, and while at the same time stigmas associated with counseling and mental health treatment have been a subject of much focus and research, the need for psychological support in many cases seems apparent. Unlike Coast Guard recruiting specialist, which is a qualification that essentially any willing and able auxiliarist can be trained to perform, psychology is a professional field that requires extensive education and licensing, and would likely require targeted recruiting to add capability to our organization. However, we did make progress on several challenges outlined in the 2019 gap analysis, despite the barriers put in place by the pandemic, and in addition to some declines in membership. ATON verifier dropped significantly from a ranking of 4th in 2019 to a tie for 26th in 2023. The Prevention Directorate attributes the success of the Navigation Systems program in large part to the priority shift in the Coast Guard's need to resolve a backlog of uninspected private aids to navigation. The Prevention Directorate's NS division stepped up their efforts by providing virtual training programs, administrative improvements, including modernization and simplification of report forms, updating procedures for maintaining qualifications, and instituting virtual quarterly meetings for DSO, MSs, and prevention staff to work collectively on issues and exchange information. As a result, 03 mission hours have been rising annually since 2020 and are trending toward another increase in 2023. At the same time, the Coast Guard has reported that in most districts, a 100% completion of required PATON inspections has been achieved. OXEK also dropped significantly from 8th ranking overall in 2019 down to a tie for 30th in 2023. Unlike ATON Verifier, which had a focused national effort likely as the catalyst for that decrease, the factors driving the need for OXEK down are a little more nebulous, and more detailed research may be necessary to better understand the factors that drove that increase. The true value of gap analysis is the foundation that it lays for future work based on the information collected and synthesized during the survey process. Several of the 2019 gap analysis report recommendations have been completed and/or implemented and represent progress towards accomplishment of those recommended actions. Several districts have developed successful and ongoing programs to greatly streamline and increase the frequency of augmentation opportunities. You've already heard District 11's Request for Forces program mentioned a couple times this morning, and I put that out as an excellent example. Augmentation support and tracking structures were recommended to be built into OXData, and with the move to OXData 2, the system now meets or exceeds the recommendations made for those purposes in the 2019 GAP report. Many of the metrics envisioned in 2019 are now available through custom reports in OXData 2, several of which were used this year to help in the data analysis phase of the 2023 GAP analysis. And numerous deployments have refined the incident management auxiliary coordination cell capabilities. Updates to the auxiliary deployment guide and associated BSX deployment guidance developed during the Southwest border deployments in 2022 to 2023 have greatly improved and refined the auxiliary's augmentation management capabilities, both at the national and at the district levels. Along with these successes are some opportunities for additional work that remain relevant in large part due to the setbacks, again, imposed by the pandemic. We hope that taking a renewed look at how these may inform strategic planning efforts across the auxiliary will be a benefit of this gap analysis. The auxiliary should consider retooling this gap analysis effort into a more permanent and ongoing effort to continuously and organically assess and monitor augmentation needs, capabilities, and trends across the Coast Guard, with the ultimate goal of developing a more anticipatory or proactive approach for identifying what capabilities may be needed to support the Coast Guard. We should consider whether programs directed at certain professional trades or needed professional skills, and consider ways to make their onboarding and initial training requirements as efficient as possible. We should develop actionable guidance for national staff directorates and district leadership to assist them in developing action plans intended to develop the needed capabilities that have been identified in this gap analysis. The gap survey has evolved over the years, and driving that evolution have been the lessons learned every time we perform this survey. It's also critical as we move forward that the challenges encountered during this year's survey are memorialized for consideration in the next gap analysis cycle. And we have done that and provided those recommendations in the report. So finally, where do we go from here? We'll be working with the various national staff directorates that are directly impacted by the top 10 to assist them in developing action plans. Again, the value of the gap analysis is that we take this information and we do something with it. As districts, you know, I've heard someone up on stage say a number of times, if you've seen one district, you've seen one district. That's very true. On the staff, it's often said, if you give me 16 districts, I'll show you 17 ways of doing business. As we recognize as a national staff, the variety that we see from coast to coast and actually beyond the coast when we consider the the other places that have been talked about, like the Philippines and Guam and a detachment in Singapore. There's varied needs in all the districts. And yet, it's up to the national staff to do things to assist you in developing these resources. And so those are our next steps, to try and take that information that you've given us and determine goals, targets, and success metrics to be able to look back at the next N-Train, at the next NACON. Have we made progress? What does success look like in each of these figures? So we'll be working with you to do that and develop that, and we look forward to giving additional progress reports at N-Train and NACON next year. I want to close with a couple of thank yous. This is always a Herculean effort that has a lot of moving parts, and it literally touches every aspect of our organization. So I want to start by thanking Bill Hanlon, Director Q, Eric Nielsen, one of his division chiefs who led the data collection effort. I will tell you that as we have 16 different districts, when we start gap analysis each cycle, each district meets gap analysis with varying levels of enthusiasm. And it's really up to Bill to kind of bring that 100% participation across the line sometimes. So just great job to them. In the trend analysis and data analysis group, I really couldn't have done it. I'm looking over. I still don't think she's in the room because she had another meeting, but Jen Austin is a data rock star and was indispensable to me in crunching numbers, pulling reports, helping shoot holes in hypotheses, and the report and conclusions and recommendations that you got are directly related to the assistance that she provided to me. So I want to thank her for that. And finally, again, thanks to all of you. This is important national perspective. It's perspective that we can't get without your participation. National can't do things to help support your programs and build these capabilities for delivery at the local level if you don't help us understand what the needs are. So although it's difficult sometimes and it requires a lot of phone calls, a lot of effort, I think the product was worth it. I think we have actionable intelligence we can use to move the organization forward. And again, I want to thank you for all the hard work.
Mrs. Creselius, do you have any announcements for us?
I do, but I'm going to save them all for later. So we'll have notes to take. We're going to take a break for 15 minutes. So if you want to be back in your seat at 09:46. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin. Please take this opportunity to set your cell phones and other mobile devices to silent. Thank you.
You know, I think they're gonna get, hey, stranger. I'm not reaching too easily.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program is about to begin. Please take this opportunity to set your cell phones and other mobile devices to silent. Thank you.
Okay, we could reconvene the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, sir. We are now going to hear from our National Commodore, Gus Formato, on the state of the auxiliary.
So I want to move that a little further away because it looks like it wants to bite me or something. So I'm thrilled, absolutely overjoyed to tell you that so many great things have happened since the last time we got together in St. Louis. District Commodores, Chiefs of Staff, NACOs, each of you have been invited to a breakfast tomorrow morning. And that breakfast is to introduce you to NACO's Inclusion Advisory Group. I formed this work group with the intent of making us a much more inclusive organization, because we truly need to be. We benefit so much from it, but more importantly, to inspire so many others to seek leadership roles. One of the common threads I keep hearing as I speak to and address each group is how difficult it has become for some of us to convince others or to inspire others to assume a leadership role. Well, this group is looking to address that, and it's looking to address it in a very inclusive manner. We'll go into this much more tomorrow morning, but our goal is to create an atmosphere where someone feels welcomed, someone feels valued, and wants to aspire to leadership, especially senior leadership roles. And they'll know that each of their contributions is both valued and appreciated. So in short, that's what we're looking to accomplish. And you'll get much more of that tomorrow morning at breakfast. I'm happy to tell you that we're exploring the possibility of assisting in the background checks for new enrollments. And as VNACO said, we have a work group to simplify and expedite the onboarding process, and we're hoping that that will help that. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I will be honored to attend the chartering, the planking of our ACS, our chaplain cyber flotilla. This is our second one. As you know, we have cyber flotilla, and this too will be a virtual flotilla as well as brick and mortar. Sadly, and I'm very disappointed about this, there has been a great deal of disinformation about the ACS flotilla, and I intend on addressing that later today when I meet with the district commodores and the chiefs of staff. Down the road, I'm looking to also set up a similar situation for our health services people. Keeping in mind that health services, chaplain, and cyber, these members may be spread out and so far from a brick and mortar flotilla that it would be impossible for them to attend. And again, to be inclusive, this is a step in that direction. And I'm going to use one of our members in the cyber virtual flotilla who resides in Germany. And obviously, if the meeting is being held in Maryland, it might be a little difficult commute for him. So it enables us to reach out to more people who can support us and support our missions. With that, supporting us, supporting our missions, I want to touch briefly on targeted recruiting. We just heard about the gap analysis, and we know that we have a great need to support our recruiting centers, and we've been doing that, but we need to step that game up as well. And we also realize that we now have a need for psychologists. And that's pretty understandable considering what a lot of people have seen with their efforts at the southwest border, at Operation Vigilant Sentry down the Florida Straits. So we're going to be looking to emphasize that when we recruit as well. I had an excellent phone call yesterday afternoon with Admiral Poulin, Vice Commandant, and we spoke about the Coast Guard Museum, and we spoke about the history of the Coast Guard and the history of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. What we determined is that we need to increase the awareness and the visibility among both active duty and auxiliary regarding the museum. So for those who are unaware, the museum is under construction in New London, Connecticut, which is a Coast Guard city, and it will feature the rich history of the Coast Guard as well as the rich history of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. We are going to expand our historian division to support that effort, and this is something that we're pretty excited about. I realize it's probably a couple of years down the road from completion, but this will be a living monument to all the things that we've done. As Captain Glendie indicated, we've worked with the staff of BSX to develop a relevant uniform and grooming policy. And I have to tell you, I am really, really proud of this policy. I think it's outstanding. And I'd like to acknowledge Commander Winans and Steve Minutolo for their effort and all their hard work with us to create that policy. Gentlemen, thank you. We couldn't have done it without you. I'm honored to tell you that we have members of our H Directorate, our Human Resources Directorate, as well as our Training Directorate, hands-on involved in the Coast Guard's Total Workforce Transformation Task Force. We have a seat at that table. That's a pretty big honor. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize our health services personnel and our interpreters for their invaluable support both at the southwest border and at the Florida Straits. It was a very difficult mission, and they stood tall. So I'm proud of each and every one of you. Thank you. We are also exploring the possibility of expanding our roles with some administrative work with CGIS, as indicated earlier. And as I mentioned the last time we met, we've been asked to assist with the closeout of a number of open contracts that the Coast Guard has. All in all, no one sat on their hands in the few months that we've been apart. Each of our teams have been going at full speed, and I want to thank each and every one of you. It's because of your efforts that this organization is so great. It is because of your efforts that this is the #1 volunteer life-saving service in the world. Thank you. I thank each and every one of you.
All right, we are now going to address the national recommendations that have been submitted. You all received 4 recommendations to be acted upon at the national board meeting on Saturday. In your packet, you only have 3 of those board meetings. One of those was withdrawn. It was the recommendation for the full-size Cutterman pin on the dress uniform. That's already been approved, so that is not in the packet. So you'll have 3 of those. And BNACO Kirkwood, we'll read those now.
Thank you. Yes. Each member of the National Board received a copy of the recommendations on July 18th. I will present an overview of each of the recommendations, and they will also be discussed tomorrow in the National Area Planning meetings. The first recommendation is to revise the auxiliary manual regarding points eligible for the Annual Service Award M device. This recommendation would grant the ability of members working in Operations Program Navigation Systems to earn navigation system points towards the Operational Service Award M device worn on the Annual Service Award. If passed, members would earn 3 points for each of the following codes. Code 3, National Systems, Navigation Systems Patrol. Code 30, ATON. Code 31, PATON. Code 32, Bridges. Is there any further discussion? All right, moving on. Recommendation 2 is the creation of a leadership development ribbon. The approval of this recommendation would allow the creation of a U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Leadership Development Ribbon to be awarded to members of the auxiliary who successfully complete all of the requirements for the Leadership Competency Level 2 as prescribed by the Training Directorate. A small bronze star would be awarded for each additional level completed through Leadership Competency Level 5. Is there any further discussion on this recommendation? All right, moving on. Recommendation 3 is a legal program insignia. This recommendation would request the Coast Guard's Judge Advocate General to designate the auxiliary legal services attorneys when authorized by their active duty supervisor, the DSO LPs, ADSO LPs, Assistant Chief Counsels, Deputy Chief Counsel, and Chief Counsel to wear the silver legal program qualification insignia that has been approved for members by the Coast Guard Auxiliary and civilian legal professional staff of the Coast Guard's military and civilian legal professional staff not assigned to Coast Guard Judge Advocate positions. It would also amend the auxiliary uniform regulations to authorize all such designees to wear the Silver Legacy Program qualification insignia while actively serving in those designated positions in the same manner as the Coast Guard's military members designated to wear the insignia. Is there any further discussion on this recommendation? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commodore Kirkwood. I would now like to invite up Joe Espino, Deputy Director for Cybersecurity, to give us a cyber update. I'm gonna have to mall walk it.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. I'm going to talk about three different three topic areas. The internal cybersecurity updates, I'm talking about the augmentation program, and then a little bit about the cyberspace flotilla that the National Commodore just mentioned. So on the internal side, a few of these got mentioned in the DNACO's report, but one of the biggest highlights recently was the adding end-to-end encryption for all of our WOW websites. This is a huge add-on for our systems, and for us, it's been one of the sources of a lot of our issues for our WOW sites. So having that new system is awesome. We're expanding the standard space single sign-on. You see the logo. That's been already out there on Aux Directory, NTC, and some of the other systems. We're in the process of getting that rolled out to the member zone in WOW, and that's going to be talked about a little bit later on in OpCon as well. And then finally, one of the things we're trying to do is really bring in a lot more cybersecurity policies where they're appropriate for the auxiliary, and basically use those to enhance our cybersecurity posture. One of the focus areas that we've got, and it's been kind of the one of our problem sets for recent past, is dealing with protection of personally identifiable information and then the sensitive personally identifiable information. These incidents, when they do occur, are resource draining. They take months to remediate, and then all the follow-on activities that have to go with that. We just had one, our most recent one back in, it occurred in January, and we're just closing it out this month with our final report. So these things take 8, 9 months or so to remediate. Some of our other ones have taken even longer. So just as a reminder, please, go back to that one of the core training classes, the safeguarding PII, that according to DHS and Coast Guard standards. It's part of the core training. Please go back and look at it. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to folks in the directorate for questions, because we really want to try to avoid these incidents. There are tools available for transferring various types of sensitive information, whether it's PII, SPII, the personal health information, and controlled unclassified information, so some of your operational data, between Coast Guard and auxiliary organizations. So there are ways to do it. If you need help, please reach out to us, and we can try to point you in that right direction. And then we are working on finalizing some guidance as to how to securely store PII and SPII on our Google Workspace for CGAuxNet. We're finalizing our planning for this October's. We hold it every October, or not just us, but the entire country has National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We're working on our campaign right now. Expect to have an all-aux released at the beginning of the month to announce that campaign, as well as to have a newly updated version of the cybersecurity awareness brief that we put out there, as well as if there's districts that are interested in having some of our folks speak remotely at some of your D-trains, or if we have somebody in your area, we'd be happy to do that to provide some outreach and awareness type materials for you. We can also do some other things to have some events for that monthly campaign. And then finally, we're working on following up our 2021 auxiliary cybersecurity risk assessment with a 1 in 24. We'll kick that off in January. And what that will do is basically assess all the recommendations and findings that we had from the previous report, see where we're at, as well as do a zero-based review, go ahead and see our current status of everything in the auxiliary cyberspace, see how we're doing, and try to identify opportunities to improve. Moving on to the AuxCyber augmentation program. These were the framework documents. We started out last July with the Commandant's auxiliary policy statement, including the cyber as one of the mission areas for the auxiliary. Then a couple months later, an appendix came out just for the auxiliary in the new cyberspace operations manual, and then back in December, as was mentioned in NTRAIN, the Coast Guard Cyber Command put out their instruction as to how to manage the augmentation program. Where we're at, we are still onboarding a lot of our folks. It's been a little bit slower than we've wanted. We've had a few struggles, but we have been getting a lot of stuff done while that's been going on. We have pared down our candidate pool as we've been verifying interest and also reviewing the qualifications of folks. Some of the things that were self-reported may not have been what the Coast Guard was looking for, so we've been adjusting our pool. But we do still have a pretty solid candidate pool. We've got 80 members that are going through the process that gets them ready for security vetting, and then we have 40 members in a little over 40 members in the security vetting process. The end result of that is they're getting a formal letter of acceptance that are just starting to flow out now. New members are invited to apply. It's not based off of the survey that we previously had in the past year, but you can, anybody can go to the cybersecurity website and pull down an ANSC 7071 and apply for the program. Once you're in, these are the mission areas. These have not changed, but some of the progress on some of these have. The ones in bold are the ones that we've been kind of pushing along at even while we're getting folks onboarded. We're still working a lot with our partners at the sector and area and district levels on cyber. We are working with the area maritime security committees at the sector levels, and we are still doing a lot of stuff with the Coast Guard Academy. Things building out, we're doing some more stuff with the cyber protection teams. We'll talk about that in just a second. We're doing some exercise support. We have a couple exercises coming up in our first one's in Sector New York and Sector Miami that we'll be working on during the fall. And we've just had some really good engagements with the Coast Guard Cyber Command Blue Team, which is the team that goes out and assesses our own network on a friendly side and looks for vulnerabilities. They've provided us with all the PQSs and qualifications, and they're ready to bring us in as break-in crew members to assist them on some of their missions, both remotely and in person. Red Team support, which is the more is the side of the house where you're actually going out and testing the networks without telling the partner, is we're looking at probably doing that sometime next calendar year once the Coast Guard Cyber Command team gets certified. So at the sector, district, and area level, like I said, we've been working with the Civilian Maritime Transportation Systems Specialists, which luckily they have an abbreviation for that, would you believe, an MTSSC. Working with those folks at the areas, districts, and sectors. We're working on assigning an auxiliary cyber advisor to pair up with each one of them, just at the same time as the Cyber Command is adding a reserve cyber advisor to that triad. The initial group of folks that we've got people identified for include some of the sectors and one of the districts that you see on the slide. One of the areas that still has continued to be a big thing that's been asked for from the Coast Guard has been helping out with reviewing the the cyber amendments to the facility security plans and facility security assessments. This is an activity that can be conducted remotely. As Commodore Merriman mentioned, there is a PQS that is being finalized. It's cleared CG Cyber. We're just waiting it to clear CG FAC, so that it's been there for a bit of time, but we're going to get that out of there hopefully pretty soon. They've indicated that they don't have many issues with it, so we're looking forward to having that one out there so folks can start qualifying to basically be able to remotely assess these documents and help the Coast Guard triage them. Working with the Academy, we have one member who's been teaching a one-credit seminar for his fourth straight year on auxiliary orders. It's a maritime cybersecurity course. He teaches it remotely out of D7. And we also have a member who's on the Coast Guard Cyber Council as an auxiliarist. And some of the folks that we're bringing into our cyber flotilla includes folks from the Academy. We've got a third-class cadet who's already on board, and we have an active duty instructor who's in the process of joining. The cyber protection teams are the Coast Guard's deployable units providing cyber services to the MTS. Two teams are currently out of DC. The third one just stood up this month out of California. They're definitely looking for engagement for auxiliaries in these CPT missions, both pre-mission, during the mission, and doing direct support. The exciting part for this one for me is who we have doing this. So we have some auxiliaries who already have some of the skills to do some of these missions, but what we've really been doing is bringing in, through some highly targeted recruitment, bringing in members from the Coast Guard who are just separating and we're not interested in going reserve. So we're bringing them in, and the Coast Guard spent, lots of money to train these guys up. Now we're bringing them, keeping them at those skill sets within the Coast Guard team to help out with the CPTs. And those folks also are able to help with mentoring and training some of our own members that haven't been on teams. We're also bringing in current and former members from the other service branches that are on CPT missions from their services. Some of our first members have already been issued Coast Guard devices to remotely support these missions, and we're working on getting them integrated into the schedule. They've provided us all their mission schedule for the next several months, and we're working on getting them integrated in. One thing that came out of that was an interesting collaboration with the Cyber National Mission Force. That's the subunified command that's under U.S. Cyber Command, not Coast Guard Cyber Command. They're kind of the operational force under U.S. Cyber. One of the things that came out of that, we've had some conversations between myself with the CG Cyber leadership and then the CNMF senior leadership, is how could we potentially leverage some Aux Cyber personnel via the fact that there's Coast Guard people on the CNMF teams. And then so we're still, that's an early exploration phase. We still want to make sure that we're covering down on the Coast Guard's requirements first. And then the other piece is that this organization is looking to stand up their own volunteer force, and they're using us as a model to base their program after, and they're working on getting language into the next NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. And I think one of the early versions that's been out there is modeled after the Coast Guard Auxiliary, so that's pretty cool. Final topic is the cyberspace flotilla. It was chartered on the 21st of April in District 5 South. It's basically, it's a nationwide recruiting and retention platform for cybersecurity professionals. It's nearly 100% remote. As National Commodore mentioned, you know, we do have one member overseas, and you know, would not be able to do that without you know, that capability. It does also offer training and to our member training. Instead of just being amongst ourselves, we also offer that out to other AUX cyber program personnel throughout the organization. Our plank owners, we had 9 transfers. We tried to keep the transfers limited. We want to make sure this, once again, is more of a recruitment program, but we did need some folks who have some auxiliary experience to kind of help with mentorship and take the initial leadership roles. So we had 9 transfers. We had 10 new members, 2 of those being re-enrollments. This is where they're kind of broken out. So we got folks, we have folks throughout the country. I think there's 13 states, and we have the 1 member overseas. Our growth pattern right now is, we're at 20 right now, but we are getting ready to hit the D5 South DIROCs with a lot of applications. We have about 29 new member applications in process for folks that are brand new to the auxiliary. And another cool factor is that we have 7 folks who are coming back to the auxiliary for this program, so we have 7 re-enrollments. Some of the new members are also, several of them are active duty that are, some of them current, and most of them are separating active duty. But you can see where they're broken out across the country. Just wanted to show a few pictures from our chartering ceremony. I was grateful to have Chaplain Poole come out and do our invocation and benediction, and very excited for him to be able to work the new ACS flotilla that's chartering tomorrow. So, but it was great that he was able to come out for ours. Just show a few photos. Admiral Van was the host for the event, and he'll be here on Friday to speak to you. Thank you for the National Commodore to come on out. We had a few of our members actually there in person to be to be sworn in. There were some of the crew. And I'll be around if anybody has any questions on any of these programs. Be happy to chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Is there any further business to be brought before this board? Mrs. Crecilius, do you have announcements? I know you do.
Oh, I do. All right. First one. You're going to hear this all week, and I'm going to say it at every meeting, but it needs to be said. Travel orders need to be turned in within 7 days. No later than 30 days. If it's after 30 days, they will not get paid. Okay? Next one, also just make sure, I know I said it at the last conference, make sure you're doing tax exempt. If you don't have that form for your hotel room when you checked in, we have it in the office. Make sure you're tax exempt on that. Reminder to bring also recommendations. You have those in your packet. Bring those back to the National Board meeting on Friday. And then this evening, you have the BSX Q&A back in this room. Uniform of the day for the DCO, DCOSs with NACO and VNACO this afternoon is casual. So you have that, looking forward to. And also, when you come back in for the BSX Q&A, these tables will be set with the table tents on them. It would be very helpful if you don't move them, because we're going to use them again tomorrow. And that's it.
Before I Close the meeting out. Also, the meeting with BSX this afternoon, the uniform of the day will also be casual. So, at 10:16 hours, I now adjourn the Committee of the Whole. Thank you all for your kind attention.